Hello, pup parents, and welcome to today's episode of the Perfect Pup Podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about a very serious topic and one that I don't think many pup parents think about enough, and that is emergency/disaster preparedness with our dogs. Recently on our Instagram, we put out a little question in our story and just asked what episodes or what topics do people want to hear about on this podcast. And one of the ones that came back that we thought was really interesting, really relevant was emergency preparedness for dogs, especially with what we've seen this year in particular. We've seen the fires in Australia. There's been a lot of fires in California. There's been just recently a couple hurricanes that have come through the southeast part of the United States. And I think at any time disaster can strike, and being prepared beforehand is going to make the world of difference for us, for sure, as humans, but also for our dogs. And so in this episode, I'm going to break down things you can do now. That's going to be the biggest section because preparing now is going to give you the best odds of success or give you the best basically scenario for you and your dog. And then the second part is going to be what to do when the actual emergency comes, or when it's there, when it's happening. And the third part is going to be after the emergency. So let's get right to it. And there will be an accompanying article on the Pupford website that kind of goes over some of these things bulleted out. If you want to go and reference it, it'll be in the show notes. So very first thing above all is, number one, you need to ID your dog. And you need to do that. You should do that no matter what. And that means having tags on them, on their collar or harness, whatever they wear on a daily basis. And that should include at least two methods of contact. That should include a phone number, an email address, obviously your name. It's nice to include an address. Sometimes in an emergency, the address is going to be less relevant if homes have been destroyed, that type of thing. But a phone number and an email address, super important to have on there. On top of that, you need to get your dog microchipped. It is something that is not super expensive, but is extremely important because, especially in a natural disaster or any type of disaster, there's a chance that your dog's going to lose their collar or their tags might fall off or whatever it might be. And with a microchip, it gets your dog's information stored so that if they're found even, a state away or whatever without their tags, they can get scanned with the microchip scanners. It'll pull up your information and you can get contacted. So ID tags and getting your dog microchipped is super, super important. Another good plan beforehand something to do now is make sure you have an emergency contact who can be available if, for example, you are out of town. If you're on a trip, you have someone watching your dog, or have someone coming over just to feed them, make sure they understand what to do in an emergency as well. And we'll get a little bit more into that later on as to how you can accomplish that. One of the most important things is to have a go bag, or, people call it different things, but like an emergency bag. You want one of these for yourself, but then you'll likely want one specifically for your dog, or at least to have these items for your dog in your go bag. And this is something that the idea is, a disaster's coming, you can very quickly grab it. You're not having to scramble and put all the things in as it's happening. They're already there. They're ready. You just grab the bag, or, like the large like Rubbermaid or the Tupperware tote or whatever route you go, you can just grab it and either put it in your car or carry it. In many instances, you might not be able to use your car. And so keep that in mind as you are preparing a go bag. You probably want something that you can carry on your back, or at least some type of duffel bag or something simple like that. Here's some items that you want to include in your go bag. Again, this is not the end-all be-all that, your dog might need specific things, but most of these things, if you have them, you're going to be very grateful that you did. First and foremost, food and water for at least 5 days. At a bare minimum, 3 days. And that includes fresh water for you. And I'm going to just reference for our dogs in particular. There are plenty of other resources you can go find for preparing yourself for a natural disaster. So we're just going to keep it focused on our dogs. Food and water for at least 3 days. If you can get a week's worth, great. Some people with big dogs or multiple dogs, that might be a challenge. One way to help with the weight of food is to use something like a dehydrated food, just because it is much more lightweight. Like a 10-pound box of dehydrated food is going to give you like 30 pounds worth of food versus trying to lug around a 30-pound bag of kibble or something like that. And on top of that, you're going to want a collapsible bowl to include in that go bag for your dogs, food and water. If you can only do one, that's just fine. I think just one is sufficient. You're also going to want a sturdy 6-foot leash, a 30-foot leash if you can, just because there might be instances where, if something were to happen and you're having to walk a really, really far distance and you don't necessarily need your dog right up next to you on a 6-foot leash, a 30-foot leash can be nice to give your dog some freedom to roam. And I personally, in our go bag for our dogs, we have a harness for each of them, just because when you think about what might happen in an emergency and the types of situations you might be put into, the last thing you want is your dog to be able to slip out of a collar. And so that's why I opt for a harness. Obviously, I keep my collars on my dogs at all times. And so the harness is just an extra piece to keep them more secure to me. Of course, you're also going to want medications for your dog if they're on anything special. Again, shoot for a minimum 3 days worth, but ideally for medications, since they're usually lighter, you'd like to bring at least a week's worth. You'll want a pet first aid kit, and I will link to an article on the Pupford website about first aid kits for dogs and some ideas that you can have there. And then a couple other things that you've maybe not, you wouldn't think of but are super important. You want a towel or a blanket for your dog. It doesn't need to be big, just something that they can curl up on at night if need to, or you can dry them off, hopefully, if needed. There's some really great towel options out there that are really absorbent but dry quickly, those types of things. It's a good idea to bring some poop bags. I know you'd probably think, well, in an emergency, I'm not going to be worried about picking up my dog's poop. But in some instances, if you get evacuated from your home and your temporary shelter is at like a stadium or something like that, it is a courtesy, and it'll just be nice to be able to pick up after your dog as needed. One thing that I have that I highly, highly recommend, and I'll put a link to these in the show notes as well as in the article, is like something to go on your dog's collar or harness that lights up. We have one that kind of just actually goes around their neck. It looks like an extra collar basically, and the battery lasts for quite a while. There are some that are like solar powered as well. Just because, again, in a natural disaster, in an emergency, there might not be electricity. You might be wandering around when it's dark, and if your dog were to get away from you, or even having that light on you might make it so that you're able to be found by rescue crews, those types of things. So a light that can go on your dog, it's best obviously if it can turn on and off. A favorite toy just to give comfort and distraction. Your dog will likely be very stressed in this situation. So whatever you can do to make them feel more comfortable is going to make things slightly better. I can't say good because it's a natural disaster, it's emergency, but things slightly better. And on that same note, it can be a good idea to bring like some lightweight chews, maybe like bully sticks, just to keep your dog engaged, really distract them if you're in a dire situation and need to kind of keep their eyes off of something or whatever the instance may call for. And then 2 more things to put in your go bag. I know this is a lot. So like I said, it'll be referenced on the article on the website, but you're going to want a current printed out photo of your dog, and preferably you with your dog for identification purposes. And on the back, you'll want some just quick information about your dog. Maybe their breed, their age, if they have any like major medical problems, any medications that they take, and then of course the name that they respond to, just because, again, heaven forbid maybe you don't survive, but your dog does, and someone finds this on your person and could say, hey, I need to look for this dog. And if I do, figure out how to get it to this person's next of kin, that type of thing. I know these are really sad. It's a really sad topic, and it's kind of really scary to think about. I know this is kind of a side note, but it's as much as you can do now to prepare. If you never have to use it, great. But if the situation does come up where you are needing these types of things, you will be so grateful that you prepared beforehand. And then one other thing that I think is good to use or include would be like written information about your your dog's feeding schedule, like maybe health issues they might have, something like that, in case, like, for example, in an emergency, something really happened and you had to give your dog to someone. Maybe, I don't know, like your leg got trapped under something and you're not able to get out and you need to give your dog to someone else. Just giving them as much info that as possible so that they can take as good of care as your dog as possible. And that kind of brings me to the next point, which is have a written down plan. And you can do this in your phone, in your notes app. You can print it out. And this is less for like giving to people, but this is more for in an emergency, like the way we are naturally as humans, right? Like it's chaotic, it's stressful. Like it's going to be very hard for us to think critically in a lot of situations as to like, okay, what am I going to do? How do I do this? And so if you have written it down beforehand, you can quickly reference it and say, all right, this is where I'm going to go. This is, if I can get out, this is where, and my house is destroyed, this is like the home base that I'm going to try to get to. Maybe it's a stadium near your home. Maybe it's a school or a church or that type of thing. And what's good is if you make this plan in your phone digitally, you can share it with a contact. And that goes back to having that emergency helper if you're out of town or someone to just who is going to know what your plan is, because you having a plan is great, but it's even better if someone else knows your plan and can say, all right, Devin's stuck in, there's a fire raging where he lives. I know that this is what he's going to try and do. So if I can't get in contact with him, I'm going to go look at this place, or I'm going to go try and find them here, that type of thing. Another good idea is within that note or within that, plan that you create is have a list of dog-friendly areas or dog-friendly places in surrounding areas, so again, you can go as in-depth as you want with this, but if the situation arose and you had to walk 30 miles to the nearest city, knowing where they have maybe pet-friendly hotels or those types of things can really decrease your stress. And again, take the critical thinking out of it and just say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is the plan. One other thing, and I will include a link to this in the show notes as well, is what's called a rescue alert sticker. And there is a link where you can get it for free. And basically it's this little kind of tag that you write like, in an emergency I have, and you write dogs or cats or both, and like the number that are in there. And so if something were to happen where if you weren't home and let's say your house caught on fire, emergency crews show up, they know, okay, I need to go look for 3 dogs inside the home, that type of thing. Again, just doing as much as you can to prepare to help the people who might come in contact with you, your home, your dogs, that type of thing. You want to display that on your window, maybe on your fridge. And if you have time as you're leaving, if you do leave with your dogs, you can write evacuated across it. Again, that all sounds ideal in the moment. You might not think about it, but at a bare minimum, having that sign somewhere visible in your home so emergency responders know what to look for. And that kind of wraps up the first section of, what to do beforehand. And if you have any takeaway from this, I would say, get your dog's IDs up to date, get them microchipped, and have a go bag ready. Have a plan, have a go bag, and be ready in case something does come up. Again, the more you can do now to prepare for a natural disaster, the better off you will be. Okay, and then when the emergency is coming or hits, that's our next section. So if you know that there's an emergency coming and you have the opportunity to evacuate and you are able to evacuate, take your dog with you. If it's too dangerous for you, it's too dangerous for your dog. So take your dog with you. If you're unable to evacuate, consider the following ideas just as to like how you can try and stay as safe as possible within your home with your dog. Number one would be close off areas where you don't want your dog to escape to. So if like you have a dog door, close that, because the last thing you want in an emergency is you don't want your dog to run free and run outside and potentially a tree falls on them and then you don't know where they are. You're trying to find them, so you can't stay safe, that type of thing. So be aware of that. And keep your dog on a leash. That goes back to the first point of, don't let them run away or go into certain parts of your home or whatever. Keep them on a leash, because it's going to be scary probably. And it's going to be frightening. There'll be like probably loud noises, things that your dog has never experienced before, and they might try and take off. A lot of dogs, right? Like it's fight, flight, or freeze. And if your dog tries to go the route of fleeing and you don't have them on a leash, now you've just added one more thing that's going to make like this whole emergency more difficult and more stressful, and you're going to be trying to find your dog, that type of thing. So keep them on a leash, keep them near you. If there is like some type of tornado or a hurricane coming, and again, you're not able to evacuate, keep your dog in the home, just like where you would be. And in your home, it again is part of your plan. If, maybe part of your plan can say, all right, if I can't evacuate, this is where I'm going to go into my home. In that part of your home or your apartment, have your dog's go bag there. So if, like, for example, you aren't able to get out of the house, you have all that stuff there that you're not having to go to a different room or a different section of your home, which maybe has, a tree fallen on it or part of it's on fire, those types of, again, I'm talking like worst case scenario, but these are the types of things to try and think about and to prepare yourself in the case of an emergency. As after the emergency happens, or after the natural disaster occurs, and if you're still in the area, be patient with your dog. You have to remember that if it's stressful and scary for you, it is probably stressful and scary for your dog as well. So, do as best as you can to be calm with them. Don't worry about their behaviors. Don't worry about them barking at things. Like, it's a natural disaster. It's an emergency. Like, stay patient with your dog. Again, do not let your dog roam free. So, for example, let's say there's a tornado that comes through and you're underground, and then once it's clear and you come out, don't just let your dog run off, because, there could be cracks in the road. There could be, that's more of an earthquake, but there could be cracks in the road. There could be, glass everywhere. There could be dangerous things that, aren't safe for your dog, and you want to keep them close to you. I can't reiterate that enough, that, have a good sturdy harness, have a nice solid leash, keep your dog next to you. In some cases, in natural disasters, things are just hectic and things go everywhere, and you might get new wildlife that comes into your area. Like, maybe it blew certain wildlife to you. Who knows? Like, there's been crazy things that have happened. So just be aware that if there's some wildlife that might show up in your area, keep your dog near you. Try to avoid it as much as possible, because the last thing you want is a confrontation with some type of animal that you don't know how your dog is going to react. And then again, above all, like, do your best to keep your dog with you and stay as calm as possible and help your dog try and relax. And that's where, in your go bag, having like a toy, having, some chews or just anything to kind of give your dog some comfort is going to be important. So those are the three sections. I kind of went through the second and the third together, but, things to do now, what to do when the emergency happens, and what to do after the emergency. Again, I really, truly hope that nobody ever has to deal with a natural disaster or an emergency, period, but also with your dog. And it'd be very stressful. Maybe there's some of you who are listening who have experienced that. If you have, I'd love to hear your story and get a better understanding of what your experience was like, and maybe some things that we can add to this episode to make people more prepared. But again, there's multiple things that I'm going to include in the show notes. Links to where you can get the rescue alert stickers, information about first aid kits, items you can include in your go bag. There will be an accompanying article on the Pupford website with some of this information. And again, if you've been a part of this, or if you've seen ideas that I missed, please let us know. You can email us, hello@pupford.com. You can message us on Instagram or whatever it might be, Facebook, and just let us know, because I think, again, the more we can do as pup parents to be prepared before an emergency happens, the higher likelihood that we're going to be able to stay safe, keep our dogs safe, and keep our dogs happy and keep them healthy. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little scary. Like, I have 3 dogs. I worry a lot about if a natural disaster were to occur with 3 dogs. Like, it would be very, very difficult. But my wife and I do as much as we can to prepare. And after preparing this episode, there's more that I need to do. There's more that I need to do to prepare. So I hope that you do the same. I hope that you at a bare minimum, make sure your dog's ID tags are updated and get them microchipped. But hopefully you create a plan, you create a go bag, have it ready that you can grab it and head out with your dog as needed. And again, of course, continue working on obedience. training and improving your relationship with your dog and making sure that they understand certain behaviors like recall and like stay. Those types of things can actually be life-saving in these emergency situations. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please let us know, leave us a review, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. We really do love hearing from you, and we will catch you on the next episode.